Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. It's been a little while since I posted. I feel like I'm becoming a cryptid, turning up now and again, but anyway, I'm very excited to be sharing with you a project that I have been working on for far too long. I originally created this with the idea to recreate the character Ash from Wes Anderson's 2009 film Fantastic Mr. Fox. Little did I know that it would become the longest and the most arduous and pedantic creation I've ever had. It has taken 8 months. 8 months! Oh my gosh! Before we get started with the video and the creation, have you subscribed to the channel yet? Make sure you do down below, it really helps. Like the video if you like it and leave a comment down below. I love reading all of your comments. And with that all being said, let's get into the build. Oh my gosh. The film, directed by Wes Anderson, features puppets and animation brought to life by the British stop-motion studio McKinnon and Saunders. Anderson's adaptation delves into the tension between domestication and the primal urge of one's wild nature with themes of self-acceptance woven in. Both Mr. Fox and his son Ash grapple with their identities and sense of belonging in a world that often tries to mold them into something they are not. For Mr. Fox, this manifests as a midlife crisis, a desperate attempt to reclaim the thrill and excitement of his youth. As for Ash, it's about navigating life despite his atypical nature and being different.
He's different. Are you a bully? You start to sound like a bully.
I chose to create Ash because I relate to his struggles a bit more with meeting society's narrow definition of normal and the challenges of social ineptitude and self-acceptance. First step in the process of creating was to sketch out a character design for Ash, combining his essential design features with my own personal style. I gave him bigger eyes and baggier clothes to add a unique touch. Ash's outfit is quite different to the other characters in the film, as is inspired by a superhero that he admires. To recreate this, I'll be making white trousers, a shirt, socks, towel cape, and a knitted sweater and his iconic bandit mask, which I'll be creating just a little later on. Heading to my computer and booting up Zbrush, I'll create a unique custom head for this project. This was done in April last year, so please do excuse how bad my sketch looks. I made a really basic sketch of the portrait and side profile of how I'd like my Ash head to look. This will act as a sculpting guide once imported into Zbrush. The first head sculpt didn't go as well as I had expected. Definitely going for more of a cartoony look, but it looks like a Pomeranian, to be honest. Definitely a result of not keeping reference pictures on hand of what a fox actually looks like. The second attempt definitely went better though. Keeping reference pictures on hand of a fox's face and skull, I elongated the muzzle and gave it a more angular face, and ultimately just tried to make him look far less cartoony. I added lines to the model which will act as lines of demarcation for when it comes to the application of the fur later on, so that I'm able to see where the colour needs to change. Ash has a notch in his right ear, so to replicate that I just mirror the ears and then subtract a section from the one on the right. At this point I'm hollowing out the eyes and the internal structure of the model so I can add custom eyes later on. With all our 3D model parts complete, we can print. To print the model, I'm using my Elegoo Mars Pro 2 resin printer. I did have to end up printing the head again because they just ended up far too small. After curing and cleaning the model, the head is ready. It comes in 2 pieces, the face and the back of the head attachment. Having the model in 2 pieces like this allows me access to the inside of the head so I can attach eyes and the neck peg later on. To accompany the head, I decided to use a 1/6 scale boy doll body. While I do wish I had made a custom sculpted body for this project, at the time of filming, I didn't know how to do it. Off camera, I made a really basic tail from some wax-coated garden wire and craft tape. To attach the tail, I cut a hole in the base of the back, which I can slot the wire into. This will be left removable for the sake of dressing the doll later on. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, offering thousands of classes taught by industry experts. Whether you're interested in film, illustration, design, freelancing, or productivity, Skillshare has a course for you. Skillshare's Learn by Doing approach allows you to create and share your project, getting valuable feedback from the community. Their on-demand platform and stackable lessons give you the flexibility to learn at your own pace. I've been wanting to learn more about video production, so have been taking Marques Brownlee's course where he guides you through the entire process of creating one of his tech review videos, from script to shoot to edit, as well as tips on cameras, lighting, and software. It's summer in the Northern Hemisphere, school breaks, and slower work schedules. It's the perfect time to expand your skills or learn a new hobby for your summer bucket list. The first 500 people to use my link in the description below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Thank you so much for Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Creating clothing for puppetry and dolls offers a fantastic opportunity to explore different methods and techniques of replicating textiles on such a small scale. Ash's outfit resembles that of a comic book superhero he idolizes, seemingly created from household items. Knit can be found in a variety of ways. You can knit things yourself, but because it's on such a small scale, I think I'm just gonna buy it. So I went and got some knit socks from just Kmart. At the shop, I went and grabbed 2 different types of knit socks. One is a very thick and woolly winter sock, and the other is a standard compression sock, which I'll use for his feet socks later on. I'm saying socks a lot, take a shot. While it can be really convenient to buy the knit pre-made like this, once it's cut for the pattern pieces, it will unravel ridiculously easy. So you need to make sure to lock it in place before you start anything. To do this, I just glue the edges of the fabric, fold the edges over, and sew them in place. I personally prefer to use glue stick for this because it can be easily washed away with warm soapy water once the garment is finished. In the film, Ash wears a bandit mask, which is made of a sock from his world.
But I modified this tube sock. They look good. Yeah.
Well, I could make it out of a sock like he does. I wanted to create an item that was not only removable, but also is shaped to fit the model's face. To achieve this, I first grabbed the model, wrapped it in cling film, then layered it with craft tape. This allows me to sketch pattern pieces directly onto the model. Once sketched, I cut the tape off and use them for my pattern. Ironic in a way, making the choice to use a sock to make the jumper, but not a sock to make the sock mask. I originally used polyester material, which is what you see me using here, as not only is it very sturdy, but you can cauterize the ends to stop the material from fraying. It's ideal. However, when I went to go take the pictures, it's really ugly and I don't like it. I think it looks awful. So even though I'd finished this whole thing completely, I remade the mask, which took a little bit longer, out of linen, because not only is that a sturdy material, but it has very prominent fibers, like thick fibers. And I liked the way that it looked when it was getting photographed. Pedantic much? Grabbing my sewing machine, I'll work as I go, sewing those pieces together. The mask can't be too loose, but it can't be too snug either. While I want this piece to be nice and fit to the face to show the contours, I don't want it to be too tight so that it messes up the fur later on, because I don't want to end up taking off the mask and the face comes with it. That would be awful. For the quote-unquote sock section of the mask that sits between his ears, I made that separately and will be attaching it later. To shape and have this section stand up on its own, I'll stuff the inside with some leftover yarn fibre. To create the smaller details of the garments, I'll be using a mixture of embroidery and paint. I heard bee farmers tended to sell their leftover wax in blocks which can be used in embroidery, so I jumped at the chance when I found a bee farmer at a market. To use the wax, you just glide the string along the block. Doing this saturates the thread with the wax and makes the thread more malleable and easier to work with. Ash has an A letter patch sewn onto his jumper. To replicate the patch, I just draw onto some canvas fabric and then embroider on there. Later, I'll just basically sew it onto the jumper. I don't want to do the patch on the jumper because if I screw up, I have to do the whole thing again. For the designs of the socks and the mask, I'll just be using a fabric paint. If you don't have fabric paint, or if you're doing something really tiny like I am and you don't want to buy fabric paint, you can mix just basic acrylic with fabric softener, and then, yeah, it's just a 1-to-1 ratio, and there you go, fabric paint. As the fur will be added to the model later on, I wanted to take this opportunity to map out the fur pattern and colour, as well as define the areas that will stay uncovered. When looking at the puppet of Ash and other fur-covered characters, there tends to be a definitive start to the fur application around their eyes. This in a working model would be for the movable eyelids. Replicating this on my model isn't necessary, as it doesn't serve a function, but I really like how it looks, so I'm going to try and replicate it anyway. To create the eyelids with paint, I first sketched out a general shape for the eye socket. Ash's model tends to have not only a deeper colour around his eyes, but it spans a much larger area on his face as compared to other characters. Using acrylic paint, I'll be marking this area in a dark brown along with his ears. For the rest of the face, I'll be using an orange Games Workshop paint. Once that paint is dry, I can start detailing the eyelid area with pencils, paint, and pastels. I also need to make the eyes that will be inserted into the head. I made a basic pair of insert eyes just using some polymer clay. Creating the eyes was definitely a case of not knowing when to dial it back. All I needed was to create a basic flat green design, right? So why did it end up taking me 14 eyes to be happy? 14. For some, it was just a case of adding too much detail where there doesn't need to be, so it just looks strange. Some were too big, some were too small, some were too bright, but I got there in the end. I'm sure I can make a creepy eye collage or something with the spheres. At the moment, they just are glued to my wall and stare at me while I work. And every time I look at them, I just think that I'm seeing like a biblically accurate angel or something. For the eyes, I just went for a small, simple black gem and seal it all in with a coat of UV gel nail top coat and curing it all under a UV lamp. I wanted to create a companion piece for this, a prop that can be used for photos. So I'm going to be making the juice box from the ending scene. The box itself is made from polymer clay, which I just made into a square. When analysing the film, there's a tendency to highlight this scene where everyone is drinking apple juice, all except Ash, who drinks grape juice. And that's supposed to symbolise his acceptance in the group despite his differences, which is nice and that's cute. But I don't really understand why there's apples on the grape juice box. Is that like, is he conforming? Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's just like one of those itches that I couldn't get because I don't understand how that slipped the net. Okay, the lettering was so difficult on this juice box. My hands were shaking so much. It was so hard to get those crisp lines that you need for doing typography, I think that's the word. I ended up having to just wedge the juice box between my desk and hold it in place like that because, yeah, my hands were just moving so much that I kept getting those wiggly lines. I added a piece of wire as a straw and attached a spare hand to the juice box so it's more easily interchangeable when working with the model. Ah, it's so cute! This is so embarrassing. I'm showing off the lettering here and I'm all proud. And then I realise I spelt delicious wrong. Embarrassing. But then, when looking up how to spell delicious, I haven't realised there's no delicious word on the box. The word is juice. Also, there was never an apple drop. It's just an apple in half. I think I need a nap. At this point in the creation, it's time to start adding the fur. This is really where I spent most of my time with this model. There was so much time put into research and testing, and then the application itself. I looked into not only how the filmmakers created the fur-covered puppets, but also how other creators approach fur. Fursuit and plush toy creators tend to make a pattern piece-like structure, which will create an almost fake skin. Then they pull the fabric creation over the modelled headpiece or expand it with stuffing material. Very similar to taxidermy. I wanted to do this, but as always, scalability is forever an issue. Plus, I wasn't particularly keen on driving an hour to the material shop. So instead of the taxidermy method, I opted for a different technique, which ended up being much more labour intensive and took over a month to complete. Starting in July 2023 and finishing in August 2023. Working on it most days and whinging to my partner the whole time. Looking through my workshop supplies, I found some ginger wool yarn in a multicoloured bundle. I cut out that ginger colour and tied it off in sections and brushed out the fibres with a pet brush until I achieved a hair-like material. It was a bit frizzy, so I smoothed the fibres out by passing them through a hot comb. Once they were smooth, I cut the fibres to a length of 2 to 3 centimeters. Then added just a dash of craft glue to the ends just to hold those fibres together, which will make them just a little bit easier to apply to the model. Before applying, however, I used a razor to thin the ends of the hair for a more natural look.
Over here, let's get some rest. A big day ahead of us. Your seeds were step.
Finally, I began applying the fur to the model. The application process was actually so difficult because you really had to think about what you were doing, always being conscious of how fur actually lays on animals and the fur movement, and making sure it looks natural basically. In my first attempt at the application, I worked from the eyes outwards. It worked fine until I reached the second layer. Applying wefts under an existing hair layer without getting glue everywhere, having a uniform length and blend with those layers, was almost impossible. Cutting my losses, I just pulled it all off and started again. This time starting with the ears, as they're a far smaller section to tackle. The first fur layer is a cream white for the insides of the ear. I'll trim the fur as I go with each layer. After the cream white, it's a medium brown yarn, adding it on top, trimming, brushing, and pressing the fur into place as I went.
I give it all to you. I give it all to you. I give it all to you. Give it all to you.
The outsides of the ear will be covered in a dark brown yarn, which is the same colour I'll be using around the eyes later on. I didn't cover the ears entirely just yet, as I'll work on blending the colours a little later on. Next, I'll start with the fur on the face. This time, I'm going to start from the back of the face and make my way forward and apply the wefts one on top of the other like scales. While looking at this, you're probably thinking, the fur shouldn't have taken as long as it did. And I totally get that. I mean, I think that when I'm editing this. Working on larger sections like the ears or the cheeks, it was definitely manageable and didn't take too long. The challenge was when it came to the face or more intricate layers. There was so much trial and error and having to redo sections because, you know, if you got a little bit wrong, it looks a bit bold or it looks a bit bad, you would take it off and highly likely the whole face comes off with it. So I found applying sections, removing them, reapplying them, repeating the process for such a long time. For instance, the eyebrows. Very small and seemingly easy section, right? But I ended up redoing that section alone about 4 times if they were too thick, or I trimmed the hair wrong, or I applied the hair around it wrong. I had to start over. This happened with most sections around the face. The area of the nose to the eyes was particularly challenging because of the need to blend 3 colours, the medium brown, the dark brown, and the orange, and make them go in all different directions, and make the fur look natural. For instance, the nose fur goes backwards and splits in 2 different directions at the eye corners. Then goes upwards at the eyes and sideways underneath. Getting this to look natural and shaped to the model took a lot of time. But learning these techniques is like learning to ride a bike, I guess. There are many failures and a lot of time invested in learning these things, but now I know what works and what doesn't work, and I guess I'm in turn teaching you if you want to do this. It was definitely time consuming, but at least I know it's not ever going to be this hard again. Touch wood. As I said, I did a lot of research into the way that the fur was applied for the models themselves. And this is where the ethical considerations come in. While researching the puppets for Fantastic Mr. Fox, they were created by McKinnon and Saunders, and I was surprised and conflicted by some of the choices made by the director Wes Anderson. When it comes to the creation of puppets for stop motions, there are several methods to create fur. You can use felt, fun fur, sculpted material like silicone scaling. However, for Fantastic Mr. Fox, Wes Anderson was adamant on using real animal fur. One downside to the material is its tendency to twitch during animation, causing visual movements between frames of the film. This was actually a stylistic reference to the original Roman di Rona by Ladislas Stardovic. He used real animal fur and feathers for the puppets of his film, and he particularly liked the way that the fur twitched with each frame anytime the animator would touch it. And while I understand that that's a stylistic choice, the choice raises ethical concerns, obviously. The film is about the plight of animals, with the main conflict featuring the antagonist wearing the main character's tail as a tie. And yet, in making the film, Anderson is insistent on covering the animals in real animal fur. In an interview with Vanity Fair, McKinnon and Saunders expressed their concerns about sourcing these materials ethically and legally. They mentioned that the fur used was repurposed from existing materials and items of clothing, and when specific colours couldn't be found, they had a tendency to cut their own hair to use in place. Many sustainable fibres can be used to create fur, such as those from hair-producing animals like alpaca, Angora rabbits, Angora goats. These animals need to be shorn or trimmed as their hair grows continuously like ours, making these fibres far more ethical than using animal fur. For example, I went out and bought this bag of Lincoln sheep hair from a farmer at a market, which is a great sustainable option. Side note, when the seller asked me what I needed raw hair for, I just kind of awkwardly paused and it took a little bit too long to say, knitting. Entirely in an unconvincing tone. Sometimes it's easier to lie than to explain, it's for tiny hairdos for my tiny little dolls. And to be met with the very judgmental stare of a lead-filled boomer. I know it's very strange to bring this up, but in all honesty, I found it far stranger contradicting the moral of the message of your own film. I understand the film was in 2009 and they don't do that technique anymore. It still made me quite uncomfortable to look at these sweet little animals that are covered in the skin of other animals. Not only does it make me think of Silence of the Lambs, but yeah, it's just a bit of an ethical dilemma, I guess. And look, I hope I'm not alone in feeling this way. Let me know in the comments below what you think about it. I'd love to hear it.
Sweetheart, don't listen to the words I say. Only watch what I do, and you will know me well. Wise up. This is a fight to the death, and none of us will leave alive, so we might as well be brave. We can be bad and good together. We can love each other loud.
Want to see some nightmare fuel? Ooh, creepy. With some hairspray on a toothbrush, I just brush through the hair on the face to make sure everything sits nicely. I didn't want to get hairspray on the eyes, so I just added some blue tack to protect it. But once the hairspray is dry and I'm happy, I can remove it. And it was very satisfying to do. With a Q-tip, I'll just give the eyes a quick clean with some rubbing alcohol and prep them for gloss. I'll be using the Tamiya Gloss Enamel. I'll just be adding this gloss to the waterline, the eyes and the nose. To make the transition of the head and the body a little bit more harmonious, I'll just be adding some additional fur to the neck. And we can't forget the tail. I did this off camera. This is the before, which is just tape, and this is the after. All that's left to do is to start dressing the model and assembling him all together. Hey, if you got to this part of the video, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you checking out this video. It's taken a very long time to make, so if you've watched it all, thank you very much. I'll be putting up all the photos that I did of Ash on my Instagram, so if you want to go check that out, it's just at Etalon. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. It really helps and I really appreciate it. Like the video if you like it, of course. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!